In this video, I'm going to have a look at installing this Spyder 6 Python IDE on Windows 11. So if we go to Spyder Releases GitHub page and download the Standalone installer, it's actually going to be blocked by Microsoft Edge because it's a new installer. So I'm just going to report this file as safe. And if multiple people do this, Microsoft will review this installer and then designate it as safe. So if I just select keep and then keep anyway, it'll take the installer out of Microsoft Edge's quarantine. And so now the installer should be available in the downloads folder. So if I navigate to the downloads folder and launch the setup.exe, I can go ahead and install Spyder, selecting next, then accepting license agreement, selecting just me recommended. So by default, it's going to install in local app data. And we can view this in the file explorer by using the local app data environmental variable. So that's percentage local app data in uppercase and then percentage. So we'll see a shortcut desktop, and there's also going to be an entry on the start menu. So let's just pin this to start, and I'll just put this desktop shortcut in the bin. So now let's go ahead and launch Spyder. So here we see it's got its own conda environment. And if we go to help and dependencies, we see that all the mandatory and optional dependencies are satisfied. So we've got numpy, pandas and matplotlib. So let's navigate to the installation folder, and we've got this environments subfolder, and then we've got the Spyder runtime Python environment. So this contains the python.exe, and it's got its own associated library folder. So here you see the standard libraries. So if I input import datetime, this will import the standard library datetime. And if I have a look at its file attribute, this is going to show double left slashes because the left slash is used to insert an escape character, and the escape character to be inserted is the left slash. So this is the default separator for a file path in Windows. So if we print this out, the escape characters are going to be processed. Now let's have a look at a standard library that spans over multiple Python script files. So it has its folder email, and within this is an initialization script file, which is used when this module is imported. In the site packages subfolder, third-party modules are installed. So you see we've got numpy, we've got a folder telling us the version, and then we've got the numpy folder. So typically we would import numpy using the alias np, and if we have a look at its file, we can see that this is this init.py. So the numpy library has the random module, and this is in the random folder, and it has its own initialization script file. So if we import numpy.random and have a look at its file, we can see that we've got this initialization file in this random subfolder. One of the next most commonly used libraries is matplotlib. And if we have a look at its folder, we can see that we've got an initialization script file. So if we import matplotlib as MPL and have a look at the file of MPL, we can see that this is the initialization script file. Now typically we use an interface module with matplotlib, and this is the pyplot module, Python plot, and we typically import it as PLT. So if we have a look at this file, we can see that this is a module of matplotlib as expected. So the next most commonly used library is pandas. And if we have a look at pandas, we can see we've got an initialization script file. And typically we import pandas as PD. So let me just copy and paste the code in the IPython console to a script file. And I'm just going to remove the output from the print statements. And now if I just go to Documents and save the script file using a .py extension, and if I exit the IPython console, I can just print out the locations of these modules. And one library that's relatively commonly used but isn't pre-installed is seaborn. So if I attempt to import seaborn as SNS, I'm going to get this module not found error. So in order to use seaborn, I need to create my own custom conda-forge Python environment. And to do this, I need to install Miniconda. So if I launch Miniconda and install it in its default location, so this is going to be within the user profile, and use the default options. There is the option to add Miniconda to the Windows environmental variables path, but this isn't recommended because it hardwires a single Python environment to the Windows terminal. So if we go to the Miniconda folder, we see we've got this Miniconda PowerShell prompt. And we can see that it's got the prefix base, which means the base Python environment is selected. Note that this looks like the Windows terminal because it's essentially a modified version of the Windows terminal. Some IDEs will require the Windows terminal to be initialized. So in order to do this, we need to launch the Windows terminal as an administrator and change its execution policy to remote signed. Then we need to go to the scripts folder of Miniconda 3 and get to the conda.exe. So if we copy this as path, what we're going to use is this exe with the command init and the flag all. So in other words, we want to initialize all shells using conda. So we can copy the conda.exe as a path and then use the command init with the option all. So I get an error here, and that's because this is a string and we don't want a string of the conda.exe, we want the actual conda.exe. So we now get informed that modifications have been made to the shell and we need to restart the Windows terminal in order to see these modifications. So now if we use the Windows terminal or the Miniconda PowerShell prompt, we will get the same results. I'm just going to open up the Miniconda PowerShell prompt. And here we see base, and this means the base Python environment is selected. So if we go to the Miniconda 3 folder, we see that there's a python.exe. And then there's the scripts folder. And essentially when you input conda, it's going to have a look at the base Python environment first because this is the activated Python environment. So it'll find conda in the scripts folder, and the base Python environment in Miniconda essentially only exists for the conda package manager. So we want to update this to the latest version, and it's going to use the default channel, which is Anaconda. So since I've just installed Miniconda, it's already got the latest version of conda. So we can use the conda command create to create a Python environment with the name Spyder environment. And then we want to select the channel as conda-forge. And in this Python environment, I want Python, seaborn, and a number of dependencies for pandas for reading and writing different file formats. And just to note that seaborn requires numpy, matplotlib and pandas as dependencies. So once the changes have been made, I need to activate this Spyder environment. So think of this as just going into this folder, and this Python environment has its own python.exe. So if we typed in Python, it would use this Python instead of the Python in base. And likewise, it would use something in scripts if we were looking for some other application. So in this Spyder environment, we've got a library subfolder and we've got site packages. And remember, site packages contains third-party libraries, and here we can see we've got a seaborn folder. So one other thing that we need to install is spyder-kernels, and this is required by Spyder in order to use this Python environment. So we should install it from the channel conda-forge. And spyder-kernels has a number of dependencies which will be installed alongside it. So now the Spyder environment is created. You might want to periodically update it by using the command conda update, specifying the channel as conda-forge, and then using the option all. So if we go to Spyder and then Tools and then Preferences, we can change the interpreter. And because it's a Miniconda environment, it's going to be listed in the drop-down box. So we see both the base and the Spyder environment are listed here. And then we need to close Spyder and open it up again in order to use the new Python environment. So if we go ahead and run the script file, we can now see that the location of all these libraries is in the Spyder environment. And if we import seaborn as SNS, we can now see that the import works and we don't get this module not found error because this Python environment has seaborn. Okay, so now that this Python environment is set up, let's go ahead and test things. So I'm going to import numpy as np, and I'm going to import matplotlib.pyplot as plt. I'm going to import seaborn as SNS, and I'll also import pandas as pd. So let me just create numpy array x and a numpy array y. And I'm just going to use seaborn to set the style of a plot to white grid. And I'm going to just plot y with respect to x. So we can see the numpy arrays display in the variable explorer. And if we open up the plots pane, we can see that the plot is shown as a static image. We can change the backend to interactive, and notice that it's using TK, which it has selected as the best backend from this Python environment. So what I'm just going to do is just save this script file as script2. And now I'm going to open up the Miniconda PowerShell prompt. I'm going to activate the Spyder environment. And I'm going to install from the channel conda-forge pyqt. So this is a Python general user interface framework. And it's generally a bit better than TK. So if I type in exit here, I actually get this error. And this is probably because I updated the Python environment without closing down Spyder. So notice when I select to use an interactive backend that it's using Qt now. And so when I run this plot, it looks a bit better than it did previously when it used TK. So one kind of annoyance is that when you open something from the Variable Explorer, it opens on top. And when you open up a plot, it displays in a separate window. And when you click on something else in Spyder, this window goes behind. So what we can do is install PowerToys. And if we just go ahead and install PowerToys, PowerToys gives us the option to essentially put a window on top. So if I just open up PowerToys, and to the left we've got the option to have always on top. So we've got this Windows shortcut, Windows Control and T. So if I select this plot and press Windows Control and T, now it's always going to be on top. And so we can see the variable and we can see the plot window, and we can go ahead and modify the code. So for example, we can add an X label, and we can see the plot has been updated. I'm also going to install OnlyOffice desktop editors because I essentially want to use the document editor for what you see is what you get version of TeX. Okay, so let me just go ahead and install OnlyOffice desktop editors. And now it's installed, so I can go ahead and launch it. So if I go to Document, and then I go to Insert, and then Equation, and then select LaTeX, I can basically use the menus to construct an equation. And then for the current equation, what I want to do is select the options and then select current as linear. So this will display the equation as text. So we can go ahead and copy this. And now if I type in plt.ylabel, what I'm going to do is insert a raw string. So recall that a raw string is a string with the prefix r. And then within this raw string, we're going to insert $signs, and this means we're going to use text. So notice that text has the left slash, and we're using the raw string, so this is recognized as part of the string and not as an escape character by Python. So then we're going to use the optional argument, use text equals true. And we're going to get a runtime error because LaTeX isn't installed. So what I'm going to do is install MikTeX, and this is essentially text for Windows. So if we go ahead and download this, and then just launch the installer, and we're going to just install it using the default options. And now that we've installed this, it will check for updates. So let's just select update now, and then it will close MikTeX once it's updated. So now if we go back to Spyder 6 and rerun this script, it's going to take a while to execute the script because it's going to try and find the styles that it requires. And you'll need to select install for each style. So I think it uses about 5 different styles. And once you've installed all the styles, notice that the plot now has text on its y-axis. So this can be quite useful if you're using the plot for a scientific publication. To update Spyder, go to the Help menu and select Check for Updates. Now, because Spyder 6 has just been released, there is no update at this moment in time. So that's Spyder 6 set up and everything's working as expected. Just to finish off, I'm going to just go through the uninstallation procedure of Spyder 6. So it's going to prompt for a reboot. And one thing I noticed is that it unfortunately leaves some files behind. So if I go to my local app data, I can see that I've still got this Spyder 6 folder, and it's actually left the python.exe behind here. So let me just go ahead and delete this folder. And I can also delete some configuration folders that are left behind by Spyder. So this was just a quick video covering installation and uninstallation of Spyder 6. And if you want to learn how to use Python and data science libraries with Spyder, I've created a video series. I'm still working on it, so some of the videos are older and are using Spyder 5, but I plan to bring these up to date.